And we are back. According to the Economic Policy Institute, wage theft strips American workers of a staggering $50 billion annually. Our next guest explores the dimensions of this problem, particularly its disproportionate impact on undocumented immigrant workers who face heightened vulnerability and often lack avenues to address these injustices. Here now is the director of Justicia Lab, and we are pleased to have pleased to have with us Rodrigo Camarena, and he's here with us, and we thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, Darren. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for being with us. And when we talk about this thing called wage theft, obviously we want to get right at it because there's $50 billion as we talk about, but those numbers disproportionately fall.
That's right. $50 billion is a conservative estimate, and that's money stolen from people who rightfully earned it. And this, wage theft, when we talk about it, we mean, minimum wage not being paid, overtime not being paid, sick leave, etc. And this is a problem that's huge in America. It disproportionately impacts low-wage workers, immigrants, especially those that are undocumented, and women. And so it's a big problem, and it's something that we need to recognize as a country and as a state.
How much does it really pick up the pace a little bit more, given the fact that right now we just got new laws coming in talking about an increase to minimum wage, and so a lot more to keep on your radar?
Yeah, the increase of the state minimum wage is a welcome development, but the federal minimum wage has not increased in decades. And so even while we have these increases, it's very difficult for low-wage workers, folks that are undocumented or vulnerable workers to demand these wages. Oftentimes they're unaware of changes to minimum wage or unaware of their rights, especially as immigrants, as to what wages they are owed and entitled to. And so there's a big problem in actually implementing these changes and informing workers about their rights.
When we talk about wage theft, obviously a lot of people know what it means, but can you give us some clear examples for somebody who may not be so familiar as to how wage theft is occurring as we speak?
Sure. In some industries, it's actually more common to experience wage theft than actually be paid what you're owed. And this happens for a number of reasons. Maybe you get a job that says, "Hey, I'll pay you $500 for a week's work." And when you tally the total number of hours that you've worked, you realize that, hey, instead of uh, earning what you hoped you were going to earn, you're working overtime, you're working during lunch breaks, you're working on the weekends, and those $500 come out to $10 an hour when you total the number of hours that you've worked. So it's difficult to spot, and as a worker, especially one that's looking for work as a day laborer or in a sector that doesn't have a lot of tracking of hours, it's really tough to know how much you were rightfully owed.
Yeah. Rodrigo, I want to talk about this here because it's often said that if a worker actually wins a case, sometimes you just don't get the money anyway.
That's right. That's one of the major problems with this issue, and that's that even when you have the courage to demand what you're owed and you go through the rightful channels with the Department of Labor in New York State, it's really tough to get money back. It takes months, if not years, to investigate claims. It's really difficult to hold employers accountable. They often fold up shop, declare bankruptcy, and create a new LLC and just do the same thing over and over again. So enforcement is a huge problem when it comes to reclaiming stolen wages.
Yeah, and you say that many times you do see businesses, and how often is that businesses will just say, "Listen, you know what? I'm not going to pay this. I'm shutting it down, start again," and really with no retribution.
That's right. Unfortunately, it's all too common. We really need to hold employers accountable, and we need to look beyond the existing assets and entities that they hold, and consider that these employers often, just uh, change names or create new companies and repeat the same issues. So there's a lot the state can do, and I know a lot of advocates around the state are hoping to make changes to the wage enforcement rules in the state.
I know we're in 2024, but talk to me a little bit about COVID and how that actually played a role as to a lot of what we're seeing today. Because during COVID, I imagine things got heightened uh, quite rapidly.
Yeah, the COVID era has really impacted all workers, but especially, essential workers, many of which are you know, undocumented immigrants, folks from New York City's Black and Brown communities, and this really resulted in higher rates of exploitation for workers. Low-wage workers in particular were severely impacted by the pandemic. Many lost their jobs. Many were struggling to regain employment, in particular in the service industries, in the construction industries. And so now that we're slowly inching out of the pandemic and returning to pre-pandemic employment, I think we're finding that a lot of workers, are demanding more out of their employers, or demanding more protections, but still find themselves struggling to get employment at the rates that they were before pandemic.
So how do we really deal with this problem here? I mean, obviously, enforcement is critical if you want to turn things around. Policy is also huge. But from your perspective, Rodrigo, what are some of the key things that we can be doing right now to help turn this thing around?
Enforcement by the state is a huge, I think would provide a lot of relief to workers. Public education on wage and hour rules in the state would also help tremendously, especially non-English languages, and especially targeting the most vulnerable workers, again, low-wage workers, immigrants, and women. From our perspective, we've built a digital tool to combat wage theft called Reclamo that helps expedite the process for non-lawyers assisting workers with the filing and documenting of wage theft claim. So we're using technology, and we're trying to empower civil society to pursue these claims and not rely on an expensive attorney or deep knowledge of the law. These are our rights. It should be easy for any of us to access them. And so we're trying to make a dent in the problem by using technology and by training and empowering non-lawyers like myself to play a role in tackling wage theft.
When we look at states involved, we got Florida, Ohio, Illinois. These are like three of the big ones, and then New York coming in fourth when it comes. When we talk about Florida, I think I can understand Illinois, but then I got that correlation between New York and Ohio. New York's not, we know the metropolis, but Ohio really coming in there.
Yeah, I can't speak much to Ohio and why the rates of wage theft are so high, but I know that a lot of this depends on the size of the state and the population of the state, but also the degree by which to which these rules are enforced. And so, while New York is one of the largest states in the country, we still have a long way to go when it comes to enforcing these rules and laws and helping people get money back.
So let's talk a little bit about the tool that you're using to really assist workers and to get their money back, and the boots on the ground work that you're doing right now. For people who may not be so familiar with the work that's actually being done by your organization, talk to us about it.
Sure. So we at Justicia Lab help create digital tools for immigrants and their advocates. We're a not-profit digital tech incubator that develop Reclamo in partnership with workplace justice advocates at Make the Road New York and other worker centers. And we asked the question, how can technology play a role here? How can the latest advances in digital tools help you do your work better? And the result of that was Reclamo, which is a digital tool to combat wage theft. It helps any non-lawyer help a worker understand if they've been a victim of wage theft, answers plain language questions to complete a New York State Department of Labor complaint form. And it also helps workers write demand letters and have a scripted demand conversation with an employer, which is one of the most effective ways of actually getting money back. That's having an advocate, speak on your behalf to an employer, cite the laws that were broken, and try to negotiate wages back.
Can you share with me a little bit about the immigration problem? Because we know that those who are dealing with immigration, particularly when it comes to wage theft, they are at the forefront of what we sometimes see in terms of not being able to recoup wages. How have you been able to deal with that for those persons who've had to deal with the immigration challenge?
For folks that are undocumented or are trying to pursue a form of relief, immigration relief, it's really tough to speak out and make yourself seen by enforcement agencies that are supposedly there to help you, protect your rights as workers. And so I think a lot of what we're trying to do in other workplace justice advocates are trying to do is educate and inform workers about their rights, let them know that their rights as workers are different from their rights as immigrants, If they're undocumented, that is, we all have rights in this country, even if you are pursuing a form of relief currently or already have a form of relief but not a U.S. citizen yet. And so I think there's a lot to do when it comes to public education and building trust. From our perspective, we're trying to do that by, working with trusted messengers and organizations throughout New York State to help people, reclaim stolen wages more quickly, more effectively.
The difference between the worker and the immigrant, obviously, that's huge. That message getting out there, trying to really spread that message abroad. Talk to me about when you're out there, boots on the ground, dealing. How receptive are people to understanding that there are some resources that are actually out there that are available, or are people just pretty shy when it comes to just saying, listen, I'm just gonna let it, as we say around the block, we're just gonna let it rock out.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the answer, and that's the the take that most people have. Sure, I got cheated by my employer, but I'm just going to find a new job. I'm just going to move on. It's not worth the fight. It's not worth the fight. And so it's a really tough message to drive home to them that it is worth it, that we can help, especially when the state agencies are so slow to respond and are so under-resourced. I think we have a long way to go. We're trying to do our part by using technology and equipping non-lawyers with tools to do their job more effectively. And luckily, since this project launched in 2022, we've helped file over $1 million in wage theft claims. We have a long way to go, but we're trying to do our part.
We talk about worker stories. Sometimes we know that they don't always reach to the forefront. But give me some of the worker stories that you're connected with, and how they've been able to turn the corner because of this.
There's a number of workers that we've helped. The story that I read in a newspaper, Diario La Prensa, that really inspired this project was from a worker who was employed in a midtown restaurant, worked, under minimum wage for 12 to 15 hours a day. And when he complained to his employer said, "I'm going to call, ICE on you. I have the power here. You don't have rights. Good luck with this claim." And that really infuriated me. And I think it makes many of us that work in immigrant justice and work with justice incredibly angry. That same person approached Make the Road New York, and with their support helped file a wage theft claim. And we've had countless stories like that where workers approach trusted organizations in their communities and try to seek redress.
As we talk about policy that possibly the public and others can wrap around, what are some of the things that we could be paying attention to, supporting, and assisting in this endeavor?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have everyone ask their elected officials, what are you doing to tackle wage theft? There's a lot that the state can do, and we've tried to pass a SLET bill for some time to hold employers more accountable. And so if you have a state representative, assembly member, or senator that you're close with or that you're not close with, call them, ask them what they're doing to strengthen workers' rights, to strengthen the rights of immigrants and vulnerable workers. Ask them about the SLET bill, ask them how they're holding employers accountable and what they're doing to communicate changes in minimum wage statewide.
Yeah. I want to go back to Reclamo for a minute and just talk about the fact that you guys were able to actually be an awardee for the JMK Innovation Prize. And that was pretty huge.
That's right. We were recently awarded an innovation award. We're really honored to be James Kaplan Innovation Prize winners. This is a huge vote of confidence for the work that we're doing, for our approach to solving some of these problems or addressing them. It's not every day that you see a nonprofit that's building technology to uplift workers' rights and immigrants' rights. And so we're really thrilled and honored to have been recognized by James Kaplan, and hope that others, join our fight to help ensure that every worker, every immigrant in this country has their rights protected and is able to seek redress when they've been a victim of a crime or seeking access to justice.
We talk about the good work that you're doing. Talk to me a little bit about what do you find to be the primary challenge, particularly in this season right now?
I think right now with with the election and fears around the rhetoric that many immigrants are hearing. I think it's a very uncomfortable climate for immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants. I think it's even tougher for folks to speak out and say, hey, I have a wage issue, I have an employment issue. The climate is very difficult. The climate is very anti-immigrant, and unfortunately, this problem is only going to get worse unless we change our approach to talking about it and our approach to helping people speak out when they've been victims of a crime.
Yeah, I didn't want to throw the elephant in the room out there, but I did want to talk about it, get your perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, this upcoming election is going to be pretty huge and critical. How do you see things playing out for you as we look towards 2024's election?
We don't participate in the electoral campaigns, but obviously as a nonprofit working with immigrant communities, it's really tough not to think about the 2024 election. I think from our perspective, we're trying to do our best to let immigrants and workers know what their rights are, let them know what is and isn't current policy, encourage them, let them know if there's a whole network and community of advocates out there here to help, here to support them, fight alongside them. And it's going to be a very tough year, but we're prepared to take on some of these challenges and help people make sure that they still have rights in this country and that we're here to protect and uphold those rights.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said there, and certainly when we look towards the upcoming elections, a lot of eyes and ears are going to be focused, particularly on the immigration issue, and then, of course, when we talk about workers' rights. And Rodrigo, you're right at the forefront. Thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out with us. And we got to bring you back.
Yeah, happy to come back.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, my brother. Good to have you.
Take care. Thank you.
All righty.